second age of reason. Today, there are things going on in the world, and a World Economic Conference in Switzerland, DAVOS, Switzerland. So sometimes it's called the DAVOS Conference. And that's where all the richest and elitist top of the totem poles get together. Actually, it's the top of the pyramid. Get together and they look at the problems of the world and try to solve them, or come up with their solutions to what they perceive as problems. Mind the reptilian. Anyway, they usually, being of the billionaire ilk, would tend to say that the problem in the world right now that they want to talk about is economic inequality, because there's 85 people on the planet who have as much money and resources as the other half of the planet, 3.5 billion people, and that's economic inequality. And it's not that they work so much harder. It's not even that they are working so much smarter. I think the way that people get ahead in the world, way ahead, is based on who you know, not what you know. So, the economic inequality, they say, well, people proposing a redistribution of wealth. Well, every financial transaction you do, every little thing you buy is a redistribution of wealth. From you, when you buy something, or to you when you earn wages. It's all redistribution. But you have to look at the bigger picture of the mass conglomeration of all these things, and what does it add up to? And if it adds up to 85 people getting everything, well, let's put it in terms of an analogy. Let's say you have organs in your body, and blood takes care of everything. It tries to. Except let's say you have two little organs and they decide they want all the blood, so they work out a scheme. And they rework the circulation to take all the blood of your body and take it all for themselves and leave all the rest of your body to deal with just 1 little % of the blood. Eventually, there's a price to pay. The body will die, and the two organs that took all the blood will suddenly find that they are going to die too. So, that's a little analogy to use. Another one, let's say, comes from the Gospels, where there's a little parable told about a rich man who gave out money to 3 of his employees. One got 1 talent, another one got 5 talents, and another one got 10 talents. A talent is like a year's wages. And they were told to go and do something with their money. And when they came back, the one with 10 talents had made it into 20 talents, and the master said, well done. And the guy with 5 talents made it into 10 talents, and the master said, well done. And the one with 1 talent came back with his 1 talent. And the master said, what happened? And he says, well, I knew you were a cheapskate, and I didn't want to lose this talent, so I buried it in the ground, and then, when you called for it, I knew I could dig it back up and bring it to you. And the master was like, you could have put it in the bank and earned interest on it. Well, the trouble is with that parable, certain people interpret it to mean that them that got gets. In other words, God favors the one with the 10 talents and more. And it's not necessarily that that's the message of the parable. You've totally missed it. One thing you've missed is, who do the talents belong to? It doesn't belong to the 3 servants. It belongs to the master. The servants are only stewards of the talents. So if they made a profit, that's very well and good. And if they lost the talent, if they were doing an investment, I don't think he would have minded that as much either, because, well, you tried. the one he yelled at, the one talent, people would say, well, that's why God doesn't like the poor. Not so. It's that God doesn't want you to like squirrel the money away and not put it to any use. The other two servants put the money to use. It went into circulation, and it helped the economy. It would have helped the GDP at the time. And that's true of the world in economic inequality right now. The few people have all this money, and they don't spend it. They're hoarding it, or they trade it back and forth amongst themselves to make it bigger and bigger, but it's not circulating amongst all the people. When they hoard it, that's equivalent to burying it, because it's not doing any good in the society. And I think that's been missed. And they don't want to raise minimum wage because it's an expense. And that's just because our accounting system sees wages as overhead and a problem, rather than as maintaining human assets. So that's part of the problem of the economic inequality. They will probably just come back and say that it's all the fault of the poor people. They're just dragging the system down, and probably criminals or whatever, and so they need to have a more secure, more centralized world economic system. And we know where that's going. It's going to the world of control. And so I just thought I would say, instead of having them swirl on those things, I will offer you free advice for solving some of the world's problems. This won't solve everything, but I'll just give you a few to start with. Number one, like American tuition debt. It's a $1 trillion problem. And all you have to do is say the debt is forgiven. Wipe it off the books. Suddenly, those graduates, students, can move forward, will earn money and put it into circulation. Secondly, when they took those loans out, the loans were probably made from nothing, and they were going to only become filled as they were paid off over years or decades. So that solves one little problem. Debt forgiveness, debt jubilee. Number two issue is with nations and sovereign debts. The problem is that the debts that are taken from the IMF and the World Bank are used to create dependencies. Dependence on this and on that nation and on this and that corporation. And what you should do instead is to make nations self-sufficient, so that they don't need loans, so that they don't need to import food, they don't need to import technology, they don't need to import water, they don't need to import all these things. They can produce their own. When they can produce their own and keep their own people at work, then the wealth gets spread around more evenly, and the nation goes less into debt and doesn't have to put up with austerity measures that are imposed on it by these banks. That's the other one. National self-sufficiency. You don't just give the country the money. You have to say, here's the money, and we will have people oversee to make sure that the money is put to good use, making your country independent. It won't be loans, it would be grants, with specific results expected along the way. Next is what I call financial firewalls, because they will always promote having a bigger one world system, one place, one system to control them all. And that is a single point of failure that can take the whole world down. I propose that they make economic firewalls, say like around each nation, or even groups of nations, so that you have many of these little economic islands with their own degree of independence and self-sufficiency and production and whatever, and that there are rules for interacting between the different nations and their different firewalls. That way, if one is taken over by corruption or disaster or just a bad plan, that thing can be allowed to fail. And then people can go to the surrounding ones that are not failing, or it can then be repaired by the surrounding areas, by the other nations, by the other economic islands, because everyone is protected by their economic firewall. And that's another economic proposal I had. So, that's my input for the DAVOS conference in Switzerland for 2014. And that's all I have to say for now. Until later, we'll be seeing you.